Welcome back, patrons. In the December bonus tutorial, I am going to get out of my comfort zone and paint a lovely winter landscape scene with this cute little cabin. So let's get started. So today we're doing something pretty different, and we're going to work through the entirety of this winter watercolor scene. Now, the inspiration for this is about a year ago I put out a winter illustration tutorial, and we illustrated this cute little cabin in the snow. And then Watercolor Creative was inspired by that video to paint this beautiful wintry watercolor. And then I was inspired by her to create the piece that you'll see in today's video. So thanks, Watercolor Creative, for the inspiration. We've come full circle on this one. Alright, so let's get started, and where we're going to begin is our sketch. Now, the sketch really relies on the little cabin. The cabin is very small. It's the focal point of this piece, but it's very tiny. And you start with that triangular house shape that's sort of on an angle, and then you move backwards, forming this roof, and the roof is thick with snow, so it's these double lines. Not a lot of details on this little cabin. I'm doing some vertical lines to indicate that it's wood, and there's a little chimney and a door. You could put windows, you could put a winter wreath, whatever, and then there's all these lumpy bits for the snow. And then you can draw the horizon line anywhere on the piece, really. And then I've got a little indent in the snow where there would be a path to this house, and then a couple trees. And I'm gonna do 3 or 4 bare trees, but you could also do pine trees. But the key here is keeping this illustration very, very simple and beautiful. I'm going to go around and give it a border. One tip is you never want the horizon right in the middle, so I'm actually going to shorten that a little bit at the front. Keep your horizon out of the very middle of the piece. That's just always a good idea. I might put a little moon there. This is going to be sort of a piece that's a dusky sky. And then what I'm going to do now is take my piece of tracing paper, throw it over the sketch, and I will just trace the entire sketch, because tracing lets you keep what you like and get rid of or change what you don't. With the trace done, I'm going to move over to my watercolor paper block, and you can see I'm just laying down a border for my piece using a ruler and a pencil. And then I've got the trace image there, and that really allows me to transfer this beautifully and cleanly without any pencil smudges. I'll use a piece of graphite transfer paper. You just lay it dark side down under the trace, and then go over that image with a nice sharp pencil. And this will just stop you from having, you know, a sketch with a bunch of eraser marks and making little changes. You get a nice, clean, light image, and if you can't see it, if it's just sort of barely there, you can go over it with pencil. But today we're working on a watercolor block from Canson, and the block means that all the pages are glued together, and so that ostensibly means that they're stretched. They're already stretched for you. It's just one less thing you have to do, which is so great. And I'm also using my Sakura Koi watercolor disc set, and the first thing I'm going to do here is mix up a nice peachy pink for the sky. As I mentioned, I want it to be a dusky sky, so sort of a sunset winter scene. And I'm using, as usual, my nylon round brushes as well as a detail brush. And then today we're also using a flat wash brush, and that's just what it sounds like. It's great for laying down washes of color, and that's the very first thing that we're going to do. I've got my pink, very, very light, watery pink mixed up. I'm taking that flat wash brush, and you can see here that it just allows me to lay down this beautiful, even wash of color really, really easily. Now, for getting into those detailed bits around the roof of the cabin, you could use one of the smaller brushes. I tend to just use the tip and the side of my flat brush because it is so fine along the edge that you can work with that fine edge when you're doing detail bits or you're getting in corners, but it's totally up to you. You can see I'm adding more water here as I go up towards the top of the piece, towards the top of the sky. It's very, very watery and translucent. And then that watery translucent bit of paint is perfect for me to go in and add a very, very, very light blue. And the blue and the pink just bleed together really, really beautifully. And they really look like that dusk night sky in winter when there's that gorgeous pink and that blue along the dome of the sky. So really, really simple, very, very light colors. I'm adding just a touch of gray to some of the snow. I don't really think you can see it on camera though, so let's move on. And I've mixed up a darker brown, and now I'm coming in with my detail brush and I'm adding these vertical paint strokes of brown to the house, to the entirety of the cabin here. Underneath the snowy roof. And don't worry that you can see white through those vertical strokes. We'll come back in later and we'll fill that in. But painting in these vertical strokes that are a little bit apart from each other is going to add some nice detail to that cabin. And when I get in nice and close here, you can really see how that looks. And with the detail brush, this is fairly simple to do, and you can always add a little extra color underneath the snow where the shadow would be. And then I'm going to use that same brown or a slightly darker brown, and I'm just going to mark with these simple lines where the trees are going to be. I was going to do 3 or 4. I've decided on 3, and I'm just marking where I want them. And then once I've got them in place, I can use the very tip of my detail brush to come up from each tree trunk and just start adding these tiny little tendrils of branches. And I'm just sort of barely painting these branches on the page. I'm using a very, very light brown and don't have a lot of paint on the brush, so I have a very small amount of paint, and it just allows me to do this very, very delicate detail work. And I'm just sort of catching the texture in the paper and laying down these branches, and I'm really not overthinking it. Just sort of wherever my brush hits, I'll go with it, and I'm just sort of shaking the brush a little to get these sort of very beautiful, perfectly imperfect, and somewhat abstracted tiny little branches. With the trees done, the cabin should be dry by this point, or almost dry. So we're going to come in with a lighter brown and we're going to fill in, and now you can see how those 2 browns work together to give the look of planks on this cabin. You could also do horizontal strokes to make it look more like a log cabin, I guess. That would be one idea, but really simple and effective technique there. And then I'm just going to use a bit of gray to mark the door, and I'm also putting a little bit of gray sort of underneath the snow. So because that snow is hanging so heavy, it causes a little shadow. So this will just give the cabin a little more depth and detail there. Okay, and then with that same gray, or maybe a gray with just a little more water mixed into it, I'm going to start adding some shadows to the snow. And basically the reason I want to add gray, or you could do blue, or even pink because the sky is pink, but the reason I want to add a color to the snow is because it will help bring it to life. Then anywhere that I leave white, anywhere the negative space, the actual page comes through, that's going to look like the highlighted snow. And anywhere that you put blue or pink or gray, that's going to look just like the sort of shadowy bits of snow. So you can see here I'm adding some shading on the back of the cabin, towards the bottom of the snow that's hanging on the cabin roof. I'm adding a little gray along the pathway that's been carved out in the snow to get to the door. And then I'm adding even a much darker gray underneath these trees, because those could be like gullies where the snow has sunk around the tree, or alternatively it could be a bit of shadow underneath the branches, although I don't know if there'd be much shadow at dusk, but anyways, I am not much for landscapes. This is definitely a challenge for me, but I like the way this is coming together. And then to do something that I am comfortable with, what I want to do to finish this piece, or begin to finish it, is to add a bit of a botanical border to the landscape piece. And that's just something that I find so nice in art, is that even when you're working on something that you're not maybe as comfortable with, like for me, landscapes or animals, you can always go back and add what you are comfortable with by incorporating that into the piece somehow, because it is yours at the end of the day. And I've just come around here and added these pairs of dark green leaves to form a wreath and a border, and then adding some dark purple berries there as well to give it that holiday feel. You could add berries of any color, or you could add little flowers, but it's starting to really come together. And when it is all dry, which it should be by the time you're done the border, you can go in with a white gel pen. This is the Jelly Roll from Sakura. tempera, and I am just putting some dots to represent some falling snow in this beautiful winter scene. It's a little hard to see, but they are very delicate and very pretty. And then I decided to use my gray Triplus fine liner from Staedtler, and I am just adding a very light illustrative sketchy line to some elements of this piece. Not everything. I'm not going to add that sketchy line to the wreath around the border, but I am just adding it, you know, to the tree trunks, to part of the cabin, and that's what it looks like when it's all done. Yes, I might be a little scared of landscapes, but by working in things that I am comfortable with and adding that sketchy black line, I feel really comfortable with this piece and really happy with it. Thank you, patrons, for watching today, and as always, thank you for your support. Happy holidays. I hope you're having a wonderful start to the winter season.